So, we are going to continue forth. We're going to talk about specifications. And here to tell us about that is Dan Anderson. And Dan is the State Specifications Engineer. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I was telling my coworkers, I'm sure you've been waiting all day for this. This is riveting. Some of the things we're going to talk about today, so we got 30 minutes. Sometimes we talk longer, sometimes we talk less, but I've got 30 minutes to talk to you about it today. Some of the key points I'm going to try and hit. I'm from the Project Control Office, so I get slides for each one of these. Talk about the contract, specifications book, special provisions, talk about our exemption letter from DOJ, a little bit about specifications writer's role, touch on professional record, touch on the transportation project manager, and then try and have a little bit of time to maybe tell a story or two or answer questions. I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so I'm in the Project Control Office. It used to be called the Office of Project Letting. I'm in the Technical Leadership Center out on Fairview Industrial. Those of you that are familiar with the office out there next to Fish and Wildlife. Project Control Office is under Larry McKinley. Larry's retiring on Thursday's his last day. Friday the position will be vacant. Larry works for Tamara. Tamara works for David. I am the specification owner. I didn't go look it up. I believe I have delegated authority from the chief engineer. I have a letter on that for the book. And each of the regions has at least one or more specification writers. So I think currently Region 2 has 2, Region 3 has 3, Region 2 has 3, Region 3 has 1, Region 4 has 2, and Region 5 has 1 or 1.5. They can't decide who's doing it over there. So in the project controls office, so we got Larry. Larry's our manager. He's retired as of tomorrow. We have cost estimating. Some of you may know John Riedel, our state cost engineer, chief cost engineer. John's with us a long time. Eli's doing cost estimating with John. We have a quality assurance group that looks primarily at the plans and the specifications at PS&E. That's Kevin Thiel, Melissa, Joe. We have a vacant position currently if any of you'd like that sort of work. Contact me afterwards, or you probably look online at Workday. We also have a quality assurance position for advanced plans, vacant, we're trying to recruit for. In specifications, I'm a state spec engineer. Greg Stelmach, Karen Scott, and Heather Howe all work with me on specifications. We take turns answering the ODOT specifications in my email inbox. So if you were to email ODOT specs, one of the four of us might answer. And then also in our office, we have Michelle, who if you're submitting, depending what your role is, if you're submitting documents to our office, you may be interacting with Michelle. And then Mike's primarily our computer support for the electronic bidding and the electronic estimating system. So the contract. I know we're going to talk about specs, but I want to put this in context because I don't know what everybody thinks about when they think about the contract. So we have the Oregon Standard Specs for Construction, the 2018 book. Hopefully you've seen this. This is our spec book. We start out with the bid booklet when we're bidding. So we have a bid booklet that's got part of the stuff in it. We have a special provision booklet at bid time that's got stuff in it. I'm going to talk later, but the special provisions are kind of start in the middle of the special provision book, and all the other documents that are in there, most people don't think of as special provisions, even though they are. That becomes the contract book. Again, the special provisions are kind of sort of in the middle of this. If you need somebody throws it on your desk and you're looking for a printed copy and you're looking for the special provisions, open it up in the middle and look for page 1. Be a good place to start. And then, of course, plans. Contracts can have plans in it. So, also, I didn't show you, but we have a schedule of items, which are all the bid items, the items the contractor is going to bid on. In the back of the real contract book, there'll be signature pages where the contractor signed, where we sign. There'll be a performance bond and a payment bond. There's things like workman's compensation coverage in there, things that are probably not super exciting to you. The special provisions book, and again, trying to make the point when you walk away, you realize when we say special provisions, we can mean different things. So you want to make sure that you understand which piece people are talking about. So in the special provisions book, which does contain the special provisions, we also have the FHWA 1273s, which are the federal legal stuff, affirmative action, we have EEO, DBE provisions, on-the-job training, there's wage rates. So the wage rates is going to be probably a one-page thing in the special provision book, but in the contract, we're actually going to publish the wage rates. And work to be done, and then, next page, sorry. I was telling him I was on the phone before I came over here. I was going to go through this again before I got here. But then in the back, you're going to get all the special provisions, and those are the things I'm going to try and spend a little bit more time talking about. In the contract book itself, which is the specifications but not the special provisions. So section 100 is the general terms and conditions. Some of you may remember the 2008 book where we had the two volumes. We had the small, thin volume and the thicker volume. The small volume was the general terms and conditions. It's all the legal stuff. It starts out with the bidding requirements and talks about authority of the engineer and talks about contract time and how to file a claim and all those good things. That's all the 100s, and then the 200s and beyond are all the technical specs. So that starts out with mobilization, talks about traffic control, and talks about building the roadway or building the bridges, and we have all the material specs in the back. So if you're not familiar with it, it's an ODOT APWA book. So we have the ODOT and APWA logo on it. It's used by most of the cities and counties in Oregon. I think the city of Portland's an exception. They have their own book. Current version's the 2018 version. We're on a 3-year plan. We're currently working on the 2021 book, trying to move toward finalizing it probably in January or February. It will be available for purchase July 1st, 2020. It's going to go into effect with projects bid on or after December 1st, 2020. These books are available in PDF on our website, or you can order them from our vendor. So in 2008 and prior years, we bought a pallet or two of these books, thousands of books, and then we would sell them internally to people or ship them around. They didn't work out real well financially because the money didn't get deposited in the right account. So starting with the 15 book, we don't have any books. There's a company in South Kaiser or North Salem that prints the books almost on demand. We guarantee them they'll sell at least a couple thousand books, and they print the books up, and then everybody that wants a book has to purchase it from them. So I don't have a supply of books, but you can get on our website and get on their website. You can order a book. I believe the current book's $30. There's a shipping fee as actual charges, and there's a handling fee of $12 an order. So if you need some books, people in your office need some books, they're available. So special provisions. So for every section in this book, the book's like 1,200 pages, and I think we have 200 and some boilerplates. I'm not sure if there's 200 sections in there. But for each section in the book, we have a boilerplate special provision. And the boilerplate special provision might simply say, follow the standard, or it might have essentially edits or corrections to the standard. We also have boilerplates for things that are not a standard, like the completion date. So every project has to have a completion date. Well, that's not going to be in the book. That doesn't make any sense. So what we do is we have a boilerplate with a format But you can pick a number of days, you can pick a date, or a number of days and a date, and put that in your special provisions when the contractor has to get done. So that's an example of a boilerplate. So for each section, we have boilerplates. And over the 3-year period between the books, the boilerplates keep getting thicker and thicker and thicker. And I think there's 500 and some pages of them now. And then when we go to the 21 book, that will shrink back down maybe to a couple hundred pages. And then it will grow again as we move toward the 2024 book. If you want to make a change to the book, if there's something in the book that you don't like or something in the boilerplates that you don't like, we have a process to go through to submit a specifications change request form, and you send that into our email box, and we'll look it over and talk to the technical resource and work on it, and it could become a new boilerplate. So that's one of the reasons, one of the places the boilerplates come from. A lot of things are instructions, fill in the blank, optional language. So be fill in the blank for the completion date. I was working on something before I came over here about the, I think it's 75922. 759 is our miscellaneous concrete structures. 22 talks about the SMART level and which SMART level we use to look at your curb ramps. And we only run that special provision right now if we have a curb ramp on the project, so it's optional language. So if you have a curb ramp, then you run it. If you don't have a curb ramp, you don't run it. So if you're working with our special provisions or your specification writer you're working with is working with our special provisions, there's kind of two ways you can get them. If you're within ODOT, we have them on our server, and you can go to the Spec server. I think it's SC Data Specs. You can get a hold of me afterwards if you want it. You can go out there in the directory and you can grab the files, and it's very fast and easy to get. You can also get them on our website. And if you go to the website, what I would recommend you do is you download the zip folder. The zip folder is going to have all of the boilerplates in it. So instead of having to download 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 100 files off the website, you just go grab the zip folder, download it once, unzip it on your desktop or in a working directory, and then you'll have all the files. The other advantage to the zip folder is the assembly tool, which is also on the MetSpecs server. We have an assembly tool that probably doesn't get used very much anymore because of ProjectWise, but before ProjectWise, you could go in and open the form up and check the boxes and press the green button, and then it goes, and for every box that you checked, it'll go grab that boilerplate and put them together in the order they belong, and you end up with a document with all the boilerplates for your project. So if your project needs curb ramps, or your project needs a temporary detour, or your project needs whatever, you check all the boxes, it puts it together for you. The other thing we use that for is to create a template to compare the files that come in from the region or the consultant to see if they followed the current boilerplates. We also, the special provisions can have project-specific language, which I talked about, like the completion data. We could also have custom language. Sometimes we get in a situation where we don't have the right language in the published boilerplates, so that the region or the region will work with me and we'll come up with some custom language, and that'll end up in the special provisions for the contract. And I mentioned the technical resource before, but each special provision has an assigned technical resource. So the piling 520, I think it is, pile driving specification belongs to Susan Ortiz, because she's our senior, I think geotechnical engineer, but she's our senior engineer in charge of the piling. Stu, I think, was the geotech engineer. He's got maybe some of the retaining walls and stuff. He shares those with Sophie, but every section, if it's concrete or steel or carbon reinforcing or whatever it is, each section has a technical resource. So if you come up with custom language, you need to run it by the technical resource, and you need to run it by me before we can have it in the special provisions. So with the universe of contracting, you know, ODOT can do certain contracting under certain times, certain rules and everything. And One of the things that you have to do is you have to have legal sufficiency review from the Oregon Department of Justice on your contracts. So ODOT has a very unique letter that covers us for more than $3 million, because I've been told we're the only agency and this little niche of what we do that has a letter for more than $3 million. But we have a letter from the Department of Justice that says we are exempt from a legal sufficiency review on our contracts as long as we follow the contracts and the boilerplates. So what this means is, as long as we use the boilerplates that I have, and we use the contract that I have, and we do what the agreement is in the letter, I don't have to show it to DOJ. We can just run it through the system and send it out for bid and award it and move on. And that makes it much easier for us to process our contracts through the project control office into the ODOT procurement office for these low bid, heavy highway projects we do on Thursday mornings. So the exemption letter is a big deal to me because it's really important. If we don't have the exemption letter, or they may talk later in the week about alternate contracting. So if you do alternate contracting, that's outside the exemption letter. That means that DOJ has to look at that contract. So we recently had the Trunnion job up in Portland that's still ongoing, went out an A plus C plus D, kind of a multi-parameter thing, but that's not within the exemption, so DOJ had to review that. So it just adds time, and if we did that on every contract, it would be difficult to keep up with our schedule that we have. The letter goes on in the back of the letter, and basically they had put my name in one of the versions of the letter, but it now just says the senior, the state specification engineer. But it sets me up as a gatekeeper of the specifications and my manager up for it. And the way it kind of plays out is that I got to review all the non-standard language. So if you don't follow the boilerplate and the spec writer wants to do something different, they have to send that in to me and get my approval or concurrence on the language. This is all supposed to happen before PS&E. Depending on the situation, I may have to take the language and show it to the Department of Justice. So an example is, I have a deal with them that we can do 3 completion dates without showing it to them, but if we go to 4 completion dates, they want to see it. So if your project has 4 completion dates, it's an automatic, I have to send it over to DOJ and get them to approve it. It's not a big deal, it's just something that we do. Try not to send any more stuff over there than we have to, but we do have a process for it. The letter talks about we're subject to audits, they can change the letter at any time, and they can take the letter away from us if they want to. So if at any time they don't feel like we're doing what we need to be doing, they can revoke the letter. And we don't want to do that because that's going to cause a lot of trouble for our procurement folks. Probably for me too. Okay, so the specification writer's role. I think about that probably starts about at advanced plans, and they need to be a little bit familiar with the book and familiar with the boilerplate special provisions. And then we publish the boilerplate special provisions 3 months prior to their effective date. So the end of this week is November 1st, and November 1st is the February 1st, on or after February 1st for bid openings. So either this Friday or next Monday or Tuesday, we will publish the boilerplates that go into effect for the February bid openings. So there is that offset. So if the spec writer's trying to put their project together for February, it's really difficult for them to put a lot of the project-specific specs or do a lot with it because they don't even know what boilerplates they're going to use till next Monday or Tuesday. So be aware of that offset, that 3-month offset. Again, as we move toward the PS&E date, if they've got some unapproved specs or some rogue specs, common things that we see is the completion date, which now I end up looking at all of them, and I only send them over to DOJ if there's more than 3. The 22040E series, where we're messing with the road lane closures, are common things that I have to look at. If we're doing that, that needs to come to me for review. We have a technical services bulletin. One of them went out in 2012, one of them went out in 2013, but it talks about you need to really allow 14 days for my review. And then if for some reason I have to go to the Department of Justice, you need to add another 21 days for that. So kind of the message is, please don't wait till, if your project's due at PS&E on Monday, please don't send it to me on Thursday or Friday before, especially if I got to go to DOJ, because that doesn't give me a lot of time to make things happen. Most folks are sending stuff in 2 or 3 weeks before, and even if I have to go to DOJ, that doesn't put us in too much of a bind. You don't necessarily have to do the 5 weeks that are here, but closer to 5 weeks is better than closer to 5 days. And again, we realize that you're not even going to get the boilerplates until 3 months before bid, and because it has to be in several weeks before bid, it gets down to you've got a couple, 3 weeks to get the boilerplates in and get the project sent in. So there's a balance in there, and we're aware of that. Regions responsible paying concurrence. Usually, like with the consultants, the spec writer themselves is doing it. A lot of times the spec writer in the region does that for me. Other times they're wanting the designers to do that. As long as it gets done, I don't really worry about it too much. We ask them to track the unapproved language with our spreadsheet we have on our website. It used to be mandatory. It's not mandatory anymore, but it really would help if you'd use it. You need to put the special provisions together and submit it to PS&E. They're going to talk about PS&E, I think, on Friday with you. Then you're going to go through the process at PS&E where our QA people will make comments, and you're going to have to go, you or the spec writer is going to have to go back and forth with them and get the comments cleared up, and the QA people will find stuff you needed to get concurrence on that you didn't, and we need to go through that process. If there's addendum, the spec writer is going to help us with addendum. And then on bid day, they're going to conform all the addendum into the special provisions bid booklet file that they'll send in that'll become in the contract. So. Other things the spec writers are going to work on is the schedule of items. It's going to have standard bid items in it. We have a standard bid item list on our website. It's preferred that you use that. We also have some non-standard bid items, some 99 items if you have to use them. Usually we're going to end up seeing a custom special provision for measurement and payment when you do that. Gene Wilborn over the construction office is our technical resource for measurement and payment. So any changes to the 80s and 90s, he's going to have to see those. And I also have to see them. They wanted me to touch on the professional record. I think they wanted me to do that because in the contract and in the special provisions book, if you haven't seen it, there's the POR certification. So for each section except for the 100s and I think 290, and there may be one more I'm not thinking of this afternoon, we have to have a POR certification, essentially an engineer's seal on the specs for all those sections. So it's important that the professional record or the engineer is aware of the changes to the specs, especially for going back and forth, and the designer, the POR wants something, and I need something different, and DOJ needs something different, that we're all get on the same page because they got to stamp and seal it. So they need to stamp and seal it, which is important. We also have to have it in a good enough shape that it goes out for advertisement properly, because we don't want to jeopardize our exemption. So got to find that balance in there. But it is important that they sign the sheets and that we get a signed sheet for each of the sections. And some of the sheets will list multiple sections on them. So the project manager's role, I think most of you understand transportation project managers, you'll CPMs or LALs or different things. So I think a lot of you are going to have a limited role with the specifications. You're going to probably be working with other people that are actually working on them. You're probably going to have a limited role with addendum. I'm not sure, but I think most of it's going to be done by your consultants, the spec writer for the consultant, or the spec writers for the region are going to be the ones that are doing that. So with that, I'd be willing to answer questions. I kind of went through that quickly because I want to make sure I have time for questions, and probably went through it a little too quickly, but
We have time for questions, so come over here.
So you mentioned that the new specs coming up in December in 2020,
Yes.
right? And then it will be affected in the first, on January 2021.
No, I'm sorry. The book's going to be for sale July 1st,
Okay.
2020.
And then it will be in
So
effect.
I know that this is, you guys are just getting just with bated breath. You're going to run out and you're going to be the first ones in your office to get one of the new spec books
course.
in July. And then you can read it every day and get used to it. And then December, like 5 months later, next December, a year from now, that book will go into effect December 1st. And it goes into effect December 1st, so it comes out with the standard drawings that will go into effect December 1st.
Right.
So projects bid on or after December 1st, 2020.
Okay. Now, we have project currently with a consultant, and they're going to use that current one, the 2018. Until the project is in progress, there will be almost at PSNE or probably advanced plan or final. So if there's any transition period that we allow to use 218 until it's gone, because it's going to be costly if I ask them to change it to the current specs while they are already has been approved and routed for, review.
Right, so for both the 2008 book, the transition to the 2015 book, and the 2015 book transition to the 2018 book, we had a process you could go through to request to use the prior book after the date that we switched over to the new book.
Okay, so there's a transition.
So there was a process. I believe that 3 projects made it between 2008 and 2015, and I believe 1 project made it between 2015 and 2018. And I realize that it seems like it's very costly and very unbelievably difficult to do, but I think when the people actually started doing it, they found out that it wasn't really that bad. But there is a process, and as we move toward a year from now, so this is October, so probably a year from last month or something, I need to check with my new boss and everything, but I assume we're going to do what we did last time, and we'll roll the process out and give the regions an opportunity to make a request to stay with the old book.
Other questions? Right here.
With those 5 or 6 documents, if there is discrepancies between the documents or even within the same document, which one takes precedence and how do we figure that out?
Well, we've thought about that. So we have a specification called 15010, which is order of precedence. And I could read it to you, but if you look in 15010, it goes through and it says if there's a discrepancy, this is the order that you're going to follow the documents. And it's generally, it starts out with contract change orders, and it generally talks about project-specific documents before it talks about the general documents. So, and it's usually words over drawings, and I can pull it out and read it, but it's, it's probably going to be the change orders, the special provisions, the project-specific drawings, then it'll get down to the standard specs and other books that aren't referenced. And I could read it to you, but it's in 15010.
Hi, Dan. Nice to see you. I've seen your email. It's nice to have put a face to you. Anyway, so it's a real stressful time for I'm an area manager in Lane County, for my project managers that are getting through PS&E. And so all the work goes into PS&E, and then it gets to your office, and whether or not it gets accepted or not is the question, right? And that can be really stressful. So anyway, it used to be that you were the man. You were like the guy. That if it didn't get passed, forget about it. And so now it looks like there's more of you in that office, which is good. And so like what happened was, or what the past has been, you didn't get involved till the very end of the project. Somewhere, after final plans and PS&E, or not even, And so there wasn't any chance for you to review something earlier to see if it was going to pass muster. And so the approval process came so late in the game that it's like really scary for people. Is that getting any better, or is there more people that can review any earlier to take some of the pressure off?
So one of the troubles is that because we're not posting the boilerplates till the end of this week for February, I'm very reluctant to review projects that are coming in February or projects coming in January. I have a whole process I go through to figure out which projects I need to look at today, so I make sure I do the House Bill 2375 stuff for the procurement office, and then I do the addendas, and then I do the projects that are going to add, and then finally the projects are coming in next month and the month after and the month after. I've been caught up for several months, so we're in pretty good shape. There are things that happen, like, I don't know if it's in your area or not, but we're talking about the chip seal that's coming in December, and we're really struggling with some of the concepts in that. And although I've been in discussions for over a month, we're not there yet. But I think in general, I've been caught up, and I don't think it's a problem. And yes, when I was on vacation, there were people that were covering for me. It's kind of hard when you're a control freak, though, to just share things. When the emails come to me, then how do I share them when I'm not there? But I think the answer is I've been caught up, and I am caught up, and I've got people to help me, so if I'm not caught up and I need somebody to look at stuff, I have that right now. We have that in place. So Greg and Karen are both registered PEs, so we've kind of had that discussion. Nothing against Heather, she's working on her PE, but just kind of probably want to go at the PE level right now. But if I'm there, I'm going to do it, and if I'm not there, then there's somebody set up to do it if it needs to be done before I get back. But I feel like we've been caught up. But I know there's been times, and things come in at the last minute, and yeah, so I don't know who's next.
I'll go. I manage mostly consultant projects, so two related questions. What's the method that you use to keep consultants up to date on boilerplate spec changes? And if they need to get a hold of a specific technical resource to discuss language, is there a list of those folks someplace?
Yes, so whenever we publish the boilerplates, there's a massive mailing list that Heather's been managing it for us, and there's hundreds of people on the list. And when we publish, we spray that out to anybody that wants it. They also show up on the website, and most people know we do it about the first of the month. The technical resource list is also on our website, and you can open it up or print it out in a spreadsheet and list every section and the technical resource and their phone number. And the consultants that are doing this work, that if they've at least made it through one project, are very familiar with this. I'm probably doing more work with consultants than I am with ODOT folks, and they're, once you get one or two people in the firm that do this and they kind of know who to call and kind of understand what the process is, it's worked fairly well. So, Tiffany, do you have a question?
Yeah, so we've already had a question about the order of precedence, and one question that might be of interest to our TPMs that work with local agencies is whether the order of precedence is the same in Section 150.10 for local agencies as it is for the Oregon standards.
Right, so we've got the certified local agency template document that the certified local agencies start with, and some of them like to be very creative, and they send in optional creative language that they want to use for their agency. And Tiffany and I meet with the Department of Justice and go over it, and I'm sure there's at least one of them that we've allowed them to be creative. And it all gets back to, it's like right before the phone call before I get over here, is you really got to go look at your contract. So yeah, the 18 book and the 15 book are similar, but if your contract's in the 18 book, you need to look in the 18 book. And if your contract's in the 2021 book, you need to look in the 2021 book because that's your contract. So if you have something with a certified local agency and they have their Section 100 certified local agency 100s, you need to go look in that document for that order precedence. And it's probably true with anything in the 100s. There's some subtle differences. So I think I'm almost out of time. It depends what the folks here want to do. So,
Quick question. So, say you get your spec writer goes out, gets concurrence from the technical resource, concurrence from measurement and payment, concurrence from you, and the spec updates. Is concurrence on that whole process started over?
it depends. Anybody that went to the law conference last week, it depends. I'm fairly reluctant to give concurrence on things that I know are going to be updated. And that creates a conflict sometimes because people want me to approve their projects or approve the language going into their projects next February. And it's like, well, we haven't published the boilerplates. And in a couple days, I'll probably know what we're going to post. And if we're not going to post that section, I know it's not going to change, I'll give them concurrence. But if I know it's going to change, but the tech resources are usually where we're working on something, and they usually want the new stuff in the contract anyway. So in practical matters, it's not usually a problem.
There was one more question. Excuse me.
Those items that go beyond just your concurrence and are required to go to DOJ, is there a list available, or I don't know, I'm just curious.
Do I keep a list of what I send to DOJ?
Yeah, just something that we can have in the back of our mind so we know that it's going to go through that extra process.
The list is probably outlined in the exemption letter. It's essentially anything in Section 100 or anything to do with anything in Section 100. So if you write a warranty, you got this chip seal thing going on. They want to put a warranty in the chip seal. It's fine. But if we do that and it hasn't been reviewed, it has to go to DOJ because it's a warranty. If they wanted to mess with contract time or the claims procedure or a variety of other things that are in Section 100, all that has to go to DOJ. At a certain level, if it's measurement and payment and it's outside what we normally do for measurement and payment, it has to go to DOJ. It's kind of like anything that doesn't feel like, to me, that belongs, that it might be touching the 100s, it's going to go to DOJ. And then if I get material advice, then I have to document it, show it to the chief engineer, comply with House Bill 2375. But there really isn't a list. It's like any, I mean, not really that way. If you have a question, we always call me and we can talk about it. But so.
Great. Dan, thank you so much. Really appreciate the information.